Powered to lead. Wired to learn.
Hello and welcome to PowerTest26 here in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Ellen Parson, Editor-in-Chief of EC&M Magazine, part of Endeavor B2B, and I'm here today with Chris Ferrell, our CEO and co-founder of Endeavor B2B. He actually we're here for the NETA conference, PowerTest26, from the International Electrical Testing Association, which we come to every year. And this year, Chris was invited to kind of give a market forecast, update on the markets, basically how our brands are doing, how that ties in with the NETA member companies and their market. And so I wanted to go over some of the key takeaways from your presentation. Okay. So welcome. Thanks for coming today and doing that presentation. Could we start off with just give the audience an overview of Endeavor B2B, how that came to be in a nutshell, and then how that associates with the NETA members and that kind of market within.
So Endeavor B2B is a B2B media and marketing company that part of what we do is publish a number of magazines across a variety of industry verticals. So we publish about 90 media brands covering a variety of industries. And the NETA invitation was interesting because NETA sort of sits at the intersection of several of the verticals that we're in, right? So it impacts our building and construction group, it impacts our energy group, it impacts our digital infrastructure group because data centers are really powering the growth of power. Yeah. They're really driving the gas of electrical power need in this country.
Exactly. And so you started off with you talked about some of the most telling market performance indicators or behavior as we head into 2026. I know you mentioned tariffs, you mentioned electrification. Could you give us an overview of what those main things that are driving all of this growth?
Right. Electrification is obviously a big driver. I mean, all kinds of products, increasingly are using power from heating systems to cars to electric vehicles that are changing the dynamics of where and when power needs to be delivered. At the same time, you have this massive demand from data centers themselves, driven by AI, that is really going to change the way that we need to deliver power in this country. Right now, data centers represent about 5% of the power that's generated, but the forecasts say that that's going to be in the high teens in the next 5 years, right? Okay. And so that's going to create the biggest demand for increased power, really since the onset of appliances.
Yes, they're part of all of the major milestones. So going back.
So in our lifetimes, like the next 15 years are going to see more growth in the demand for power than we've ever seen.
Yeah, definitely historic. So you did have some slides there talking about in the 50s, 60s as things went through. So now we're at the point where you think this is going to be a big tipping point as far as investment in infrastructure. And then how does that tie into all of Endeavor's brands? You mentioned some of the different brands that we have that are a good fit there.
It really is. On the energy side, one of our flagship brands is T&D World Transmission. It's all about the transmission and distribution of power, right? And so, our coverage there, I mean, they've been talking for years about the need for grid modernization and for investment in the grid for reliability, but the real driver in the short term for demand for growth of power is going to be data centers, and they're forecasting about 3.5% growth annually in the need for power, which in just a couple of years will outstrip what the capacity that we have. So those investments need to start happening. But then coming behind that is this whole change in electrification, particularly about cars and fleets, which are all industries that we cover. And so I've been hearing these conversations in a variety of places about what's coming. But the grid is really going to be the choke point if we can't deliver power at increased scale.
Right. You mentioned in the presentation, I think you were at a data center event recently, and people were talking about not being able to get the equipment or not being able to move fast enough. So How's that going to
Right. There's a backlog for gas turbines, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the only solution, right? Like we're really the conversations are really about needing an all of the above, solution. And so figuring out how to bring more power onto the grid and deliver it where we need it is really going to be crucial. There are places, where data centers were located early on, in
Right,
the
historically.
last few years, because there was capacity to go there. But that is getting used up, and so now the data center site selection people, the hyperscalers, are all looking at where can we bring on power, where can we bring on data centers that we can also bring on power in order to make them work.
We've definitely seen that in EC&M with those local markets where things are, all the different areas. And I've talked to some people who have said, historically it was all in Virginia, basically Washington, D.C. area. Now they're expanding out to different areas. You had a slide on that. It's going to be all across the country. But even in rural areas, like we've had people say, we can't get the technicians to go to those rural areas because you have to have, it may take 2 years to build the data center. So that's a challenge also in the industries with the labor shortages, the skilled labor.
Right.
How do you get those people to the right places? Where are you going to build them? So there's definitely a lot of moving parts to this and how that's going to play out.
There is. Yeah, and it's going to be. I mean, there are extensive plans. The choke points are going to be the materials that are needed to build it, and then power.
Okay.
And so, can we scale both the parts and the power that we need for AI? For
Definitely.
the growth in AI that people are forecasting.
And then at Endeavor B2B, we have these different brands who are going to cover all this in these different capacities and bring the information to our community so they can be educated on, what's going on, how to make this happen, what are the technical skills they need in order to keep up and be competitive.
Right. That's one of the interesting things about my position is sort of seeing the conversations from the perspective of all these different industries. How they're talking about the data centers, how they're talking about the utilities, how they're talking, the electricians are talking about it, how the fleets are talking about it.
Yeah.
Like they're all talking about the same things, just from the angle of their industry, and it's really interesting to follow.
Yeah.
And NETA really interestingly sort of sits at the, I told the group, sort of sits at the center of that because they are impacted from all those different directions.
And never a better time to be in this.
It's a great time to be in electrical testing.
Well, I think in closing, I had a couple more questions. One was, you concluded with kind of a theme that you said that stuck with me. The demand, obviously, for electricity is going to be increasing, but also the demand for certainty. What did you mean by that?
Right. I mean, when electricity is heating your home and powering your car and powering the AI tools that we don't even know about yet, but that are in development, that are going to become so integral to our lives, that becomes an essential resource, right? Like this isn't optional. It needs to work all the time. So the reliability of power, ties directly into what the NETA members are all about, but also what our readers are about at utilities and these other verticals that we're talking about.
Definitely. Well, that sounds like a good place to wrap things up for today. Thank you so much, Chris, for joining us, for giving this speech to the Power Test audience. I know it was very well received. So thank you. We're reporting from Power Test in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you and have a great day.
Powered to lead. Wired to learn.